he died. We were all convinced that he wasn't the one. But in a city like Jerusalem, these things happen all the time. And it was the hope of the Anointed One, a new life, that kept our hearts kindled for the new kingdom. I was finishing up some work before we went on the journey. And a few weeks ago, we journeyed to a place called Emmaus. You'll never guess what happened. It was honestly the greatest moment of my life. Let me tell you a story of how we ended up in Jerusalem after all this took place. It was hot, as usual, and it was a super bittersweet day. But after all these things took place, we got up and returned to Jerusalem, where we found the disciples and their companions all gathered together there. They were saying, "The Lord indeed has risen, and he has appeared to Simon." And then we told them what had happened to us on the road and how he had been made known to us, and the breaking of the bread was incredible. We had finally heard the words of Christ. All this happened after Peter, the disciple, went into the tomb of Jesus, where he found the linens just lying by themselves. And he left wondering what had happened. What was going on? I'll tell you what really happened that day. On that same day, the two of us were traveling to a city called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. We had just barely enough money for food and shelter. There were other families and people walking on the road, coming back from the Passover. We were talking about all of the things that had happened before that time. Well, what things, you ask, of course. Well, it was the Passover, as I had mentioned. And during this time of an honored tradition, an innocent man was crucified. He was tortured like something I had never seen before. And it was honestly devastating for all of us. It seemed worse than others whom I had seen tortured. I mean, his own mother saw him die. Just imagine having your own son killed in front of your own eyes. They said he was talking to God as he was dying, asking him to forgive us, to forgive my sins. I wish I could have heard his voice. I would give anything just to hear him speak again. The sky was dark in the middle of the day. A soldier who was there, he saw him being crucified. And he said, "This is truly the Son of God." And the temple, it was ripped. The curtain, the Holy of Holies, was torn right down the middle. But while we were talking and discussing all of these things, a stranger, a fellow Jew, he came near and he went with us. And he asked us, what are these things you've been talking about as we've been going along here? And we stood still. We looked at each other like, what? What do you mean? And I remember being saddened by it. The one who was with me, his name was Cleopas. He answered almost in a frustrated way. He said, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know of these things that have happened in these days?" The man asked, what things are you talking about? And I told him the things about Jesus of Nazareth. He was a great prophet. Some said he was Moses, others said he was Elijah, and some thought he was Jeremiah. And not only did I tell him he was a great prophet, he was also great indeed. The miracles, the healings. I was there when he healed my paralyzed friend. You see, 3 friends and I, we carried our paralyzed friend and we dropped him through the roof of a building, of a house, because there was no other way to get him to Jesus. And Jesus healed my friend. I mean, he raised a dead girl and she was alive. He resuscitated a man named Lazarus from the dead and out of the tomb. Surely he's heard of that miracle. Not only did I tell them that he was a great prophet and that he was great indeed, but he was also mighty in the word before God and all the people. We heard God's voice when he spoke. And when he taught with a type of authority of which I've never seen before. Never seen anything like it. And I kept telling this man, haven't you heard of how our chief priests and leaders had led him to be condemned and to be crucified? In those moments, I knew something like that was going to happen. You see, he would walk around telling prostitutes and others who were deemed unworthy that they were forgiven of their sins, that they were freed from the bounds of oppression, that they were made in the image of God, and that they too were valuable and important in the eyes of God. No matter what. Incredible. But those words were completely against everything we always knew, everything we always followed. So they crucified him. But we had hope that he would be the one to redeem Israel. He was supposed to be the Messiah, the one and only, here to deal with the oppressors, to reclaim our land. I thought the reclaiming of our land was what God wanted all of us all along. He wasn't supposed to die. And besides that, it's been 3 days since it all happened. And before he was crucified, he told us he was going to die and be raised on the third day. He told us with his words, the words of Jesus. And more than that, the women who were in our group, they woke up early in the morning and they went to the tomb. They went to the tomb to see Jesus, and they didn't find his body. They came back and they said, "Indeed, we've seen the vision of the angels who said to us, Jesus is alive. Jesus has risen." But since they were women, of course, our people didn't immediately believe them. So our customs were back then. But some of the other men in our group, they had to go see for themselves, you see. They went to the tomb and they found out it was just as the women had said. I remembered wondering in that moment if Jesus had told the women instead of us, instead of the men, on purpose. After I told the man all of this stranger, this fellow Jew, he stopped. He was kind of tender. But he seemed pretty disappointed in us, and I didn't know why. But he was gentle. And he said something that cut through the core of me when I realized who he was. He said, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets had declared." And he said, "Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into glory?" And I replied, What are you talking about? I didn't understand him at all. You see, I was thinking, does this man even know our sacred scriptures? Does he even know about the descendant of King David who's supposed to redeem our people, who's supposed to deal with our oppressors and give us liberty? This man was clearly not from this area. He was surely not, being that he didn't know of any of these events. But beginning with Moses and all the prophets, this man interpreted everything to us about the Messiah as told by the scriptures. He told us that this Messiah, yes, was triumphant, and that, yes, he's supposed to deal with the oppressors, but also, this is the same Messiah who suffered and died to save the world. This is the Messiah. The same Messiah who cut me with the words, whose words cut through all my lies, whose words cut through all my fears. This is the Messiah who's not only triumphant, but who brought the kingdom of peace to save us, to save me, you see, me from my broken ways. All of the ways in which I harm my family, others around me, and all the ways that I harm myself. When we came near to the village we were going to, I remember he went on as if he was just going to go ahead. He was just going to keep on his journey. But it's our custom to be hospitable, of course. We're not savages here. You know, we let this man travel on the road at night. I mean, there are thieves on the road. And besides, he was traveling with us the whole way. I mean, we weren't just going to let him go ahead without us. So we urged him. We were like, stay with us. The night's almost here and the day is already over. So he stayed with us. And so we got into our rooms, and when it was time to eat later that night, we sat around this table. And he took the bread and he blessed it. He broke it. And then he handed it to us. It was just like the time he broke the bread and fed thousands of people on that one day. And then our eyes were opened. It was incredible. And we recognized him. It was him. It was really him. And just as I was about to get up and embrace him with a huge hug, he vanished. He just disappeared right before our eyes. We were stunned. I mean, we were speechless. How could this be? We were walking with him the whole way, this whole trip. We talked with him, we exchanged conversations, laughs. We walked and talked. How could we have been so foolish? How could I have been so blind? How could we have been so ignorant of the scriptures, of our tradition? And then we sat in absolute joy and amazement. We just looked at each other. And I turned and told Cleopas, it was not our hearts burning within us when he spoke to us on the road, from when he opened the scriptures to us. I'll tell you what really happened that day. He is risen. He is alive. And how do we know this? Well, because when Jesus speaks, our hearts burn within us. And Jesus is alive. And his words are alive in us. The word of the Lord.